fight. We don't have to kill. Everybody in the whole wide world really just needs to chill. No, we don't have to fuss, no, we don't have to...
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to another episode of Just Chill with Oliver George. It's episode 37 now, and I'm extremely excited to share this week's guest with you. But before I get to that, as always, I want to remind you, if you're watching this on YouTube right now, and for whatever reason you'd prefer an audio-only version, you can access that on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, etc. Opposite to that, if you're listening to me right now and you didn't realize there was a visual side to the show, please come check it out on YouTube. However you choose to enjoy the episode, though, please subscribe, share, like, follow, whatever the case may be. I'm trying to build this show from the ground up, so your support really does mean a lot to me. And finally, if you want to contact the show, maybe you've got a cool guest idea or some general feedback, you can hit me up at justchillpodcasting@gmail.com. Now, back to this week's guest. I had the chance to sit down with the incredibly talented cartoonist Derek Evernden. He is the creator and illustrator of an awesome comic called Bogart Creek. If you have not heard of it, go look it up right now on Instagram or go to bogartcreek.com. It is hilarious. It's honestly one of the things I look forward to most when I check in on Instagram, because every single one of his comics always makes me laugh out loud. He does single panel comics, sort of a la Far Side, if you know The Far Side by Gary Larson. His own style, though, completely. Just great stuff. And it's very dark and absurd humor, so it's right up my alley. But you know what? It turned out we had so much in common. We had already had some great chats online after meeting a couple years ago digitally. But this was the first time we actually had a face-to-face, so to speak, conversation over Zoom. So we became fast friends, and it was just a great chat. So I really hope you enjoyed it as much as I did. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much, man, for taking the time to talk to me.
My pleasure.
I'm a big fan of your work, as I've told you in the past, and you're one of the things I look forward to on Instagram. I'm getting much and more disillusioned with social media in general, but I got to keep Instagram at least because I love seeing your stuff. So thanks again, man.
And I'm disillusioned with social media too, so we got plenty in common.
I think a lot of people are hitting that point right now, you know?
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, I guess when we spend our time in front of screens a whole lot more in this, at least in the last 8 months. Than ever before. I guess, you know, anything gets a little bit tired after a while.
But I mean, screens is like such a broad term, because I find the opposite is true, where like the few times where I'm actually allowing myself to just chill out and watch a movie, which I don't do very often, it's been really nice and calm to just kind of, you know, put the rest of the world on hold. Yeah. Whereas like social media specifically and Facebook and all that crap, that's a whole other beast in my mind.
You're absolutely right. Yeah. Usually now when I pop on Facebook, I immediately just click on the Bogart Creek tab just to see what is going on with that page. Yeah. And I try not to look at everything else, because it either bores me or depresses me or stresses me out, but it rarely does it delight me, you know, or rarely does it sort of pick me up.
Well, I just saw a thing on YouTube last night. It was, I guess, a mini documentary or whatever, and they were talking about just the amount of dopamine release that you get from clicking those notification tabs or getting that message that you're expecting. And likewise with people with Pornhub addictions and stuff like that, it's up there with cocaine as far as what it's doing to your brain. So, I mean, I worry the most about young kids who have tablets when they're 3 and stuff like that. But
oh yeah, no, I can't imagine it. I mean, I don't, unless they just grow up so totally savvy that it doesn't faze them at all, and they're not afraid of their entire lives being public and all that stuff. Yeah, I don't know. Or maybe there'll be a backlash and people want to be completely invisible.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know. But yeah, the dopamine thing definitely is real. And I was just reading the other day about stuff like Tylenol affecting that, changing your personality. It's paracetamol, right? I think that's the active ingredient.
Okay.
And
I thought it was acetaminophen. Or that's the name of the drug.
One of them's in Tylenol, one of them's there's ibuprofen.
Yeah.
Anyway,
that's Advil, yeah.
Paracetamol was one of the ones that was mentioned. Also statins that I guess are used for high blood pressure and cholesterol and that sort of thing. And they're apparently like personality altering for some people.
Wow.
Like paracetamol can numb you to pain, but also to like empathy and stuff like that.
Just shut down your emotions a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, you know, so it just shows how little we know about the brain and how vulnerable or sensitive it really is. And yeah, you throw in social media with the likes or the no likes, even though Instagram's trying to curb that a little bit, I guess. You know, you at least don't know what other people's likes are now, which is,
yeah, I guess it helps a bit.
Yeah,
well,
a bit.
I mean, The worst is really, I think, with the developing minds of the younger people. I mean, obviously social media is not great for adults either, but when your brain is still being formed and sort of figuring out what shape it's going to take on, I think that's the most alarming for me, is what are we doing to our youth right now with all this? Yep.
And you've got kids, right?
Yeah, I have 3. Yeah.
Yeah, so you probably lose some sleep over that. do you?
Yeah, a little bit. I mean, luckily for me, they just got some sort of iPods for Christmas, but it's not the same as like a full-on phone, and they're not on Facebook or any of that stuff yet. They're just using it for messaging and photos and stuff like that. But I mean, yeah, my son turns 12 tomorrow, so it's his last year before he's in the teens. And I'm definitely, it's worrisome stuff, but what can you do? You just try your best and keep going.
Turns 12 on New Year's Eve.
Yeah.
Wow.
I know, it's a weird birthday. I always feel bad for him. I mean, during normal school years, because even pandemic aside, it's hard to organize a birthday party for a kid because his birthday takes place when everyone's on holidays. So he usually ends up having a birthday party like at the end of January somewhere. And were you guys
hoping that he would wait till like midnight so that he could be potentially one of those firstborn babies of the new year?
That would have been simpler, because when he was in kindergarten, we actually put him in with the following class, because we thought, all right, I'd rather he be the oldest. Yeah. Then I'm a December baby as well as my brothers. So we always felt kind of shitty at sports and all that, So we put him in junior kindergarten at the top of his class sort of thing. And then we had to switch schools because his mom moved a little further out. And senior kindergarten, we dropped him off. And then when we came to pick him up at the end of the day, they said, oh yeah, like we bumped him up to grade 1. They didn't even really tell us. They just decided and put him in his appropriate year. So,
well,
he's doing okay though.
Who knows? But yeah, I know actually Malcolm Gladwell's, was his first book or his second book was about that, with particularly regards to sports, which you touched on.
Yeah.
That kids born earlier in the year have a total advantage in sports.
Well, makes sense. Yeah.
Yeah. Because when you're growing that quickly, to be 6-7 months behind the rest of the class, you're going to get, you're going to be on the bench.
And especially when you're hitting like junior high and those kids are getting the hair on their legs a little sooner and whatever else, then it can be a social thing too, where you feel like, you're not quite as manly as your buddies are becoming or whatever.
Yeah, it's not cool until you're actually old, and then you look a little bit younger than everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. That's the other end of it, I suppose. Okay, well, I want to get into, we just kind of went off on a tangent there, but I want to talk about who you are a bit here with Bogart Creek. If anyone doesn't know, they should check out bogartcreek.com or look up Bogart Creek on Instagram. You do what you describe as single panel comics of dark and absurd humor, which I think is an apt description. But I honestly, like I said, it's one of my highlights of the day is checking out your stuff, because I think your comics are just brilliant. I don't know where you keep coming up with these, but please don't stop.
Oh, thanks so much. Really appreciate it.
Oh, dude, like it's the best. My dad follows you now. Everybody, I tell everyone about your stuff. I brought, oh, damn it, they're upstairs. But I bought your books for both my brothers, as I told you. Oh, you got them. There you go. Have them
right here.
There you go. Yeah, you've got a wicked bundle deal on the website that I bought them from. So anyone, buy those and you won't regret it.
Cheers.
So I want to talk, though, just where were your origins in art and cartooning, and just how did you get into all this to start off?
Well, I mean, I've drawn my whole life. My brother's an artist as well. He's better than me, actually. He's amazing at drawing like photorealistic stuff.
Okay.
It's interesting. He's only just started doing sort of cartoon style illustrations like now. He's always maintained that he couldn't do that, but I don't know if it was just that we each carved out our niches and respected each other's expertise or something. And so I didn't try and do what he was doing and vice versa. But anyway, both my parents are fairly artistic people. They didn't have the opportunity to go to art school just from, just based on how they were, the environments they were raised in and the opportunities that were available. Fortunately, my brother and I, they still were very keen on encouraging us to be artistic. And so from an early age, we were, just constantly reinforced that, drawing is great. And that's a great drawing you just did and all that kind of thing. So I kept it up. It's kind of like playing music, at the beginning, it might seem like a struggle, but later on, you're glad you kept it going. Yeah. We both wound up being enrolled at Unionville High School in Markham, well, in Unionville, technically, which has at least used to have, I don't know if it still does, the Arts York program, sort of a theme school. We were just spoiled. It was incredible. You audition to enter and then you get like in addition to integrated arts where you do like music and drama and that kind of thing, you also get, somehow they managed to work it out so that you got in your regular academic day, you also were able to get, art training. So I had like life drawing classes 3 days a week for pretty much at least 3 years in university, sculpture classes, photography. They had a dark room. Like, it was crazy. We were just so lucky. And during that time I started, doodling in the margins. There was no cartooning class. But, I grew up on Chuck Jones and Fred Quimby cartoons. And, then later on, I was also into D&D. So I discovered like the art of Frank Frazetta, and he did cartooning, and then Bernie Wrightson, which was sort of in the same vein, but more like horror stories, that kind of thing, and the Swamp Thing. Right. And that got me more and more towards, everyone goes through their superhero phase until they realize
I'm still in it.
Yeah. It's really hard to draw superheroes and, like quickly and in a convincing way. Like, it's, my teachers in high school poo-pooed, comic book art as not being true art or whatever. But after trying it for many years and getting rejected and that sort of thing, I realized, no, you have to have like an incredible fundamental understanding of anatomy and perspective. And then there's just the flow of the board, the panel thing, what you don't show, what you leave out between the gutters, all that kind of thing. So, I wound up eventually going into caricature, because when I was at university in my early years, my summer job was doing caricatures on Ontario Place, when it was Ontario Place. And that sort of got me back to cartooning full force again. And again, it was live. I still can't believe I did that. I'm an introvert. I don't know where I found the cojones, but you made me draw really fast, maybe come up with gags in advance, because you get like a busload of kids. A lot of time I was drawing in Children's Village. You get a bunch of kids all come up and they all want to be drawn doing baseball or basketball or whatever the first kid said he wanted. That got them all excited. And then they all just like, oh, I want that too. So suddenly I had to have 10 original. I couldn't redraw the same joke, for the tiny body and the big head to have. Yeah. So I started in my downtime, just coming up with, what different gags can I come up with for a baseball player or a basketball player or a football player or anything I could think of, because they throw you for curveballs all the time. And maybe, I don't know, maybe that's sort of the start of the gag cartoon thing. I mean, I grew up on Gary Larson and The Far Side, and had some shameful imitation, periods where I tried to do that, or the alternative would have been Jim Unger's Herman. I probably still got old attempts at duplicating those comics from high school. And then like I said, I fiddled around, tried to get into comic books. Just wasn't. Either didn't try hard enough, because I really didn't get rejected that much, I never had really the proficiency in anatomy and that kind of thing. Like you can fudge a lot more with cartoons. The other frustrating thing was, and now this works to my advantage, but I found at the time that, everybody always responded more to my rough sketches than they did to my finished polished work. Because with the rough sketches, you're not uptight,
it's free flow.
It's a gesture. Yeah. And I mean, that's what the caricatures were at Ontario Place. We used a Marquette marker. It was a big, thick felt tip permanent marker on paper. There was no erasing. There was no going back over it. What came out, and then you charge them, they paid you, hopefully. And you'd have a crowd around you too. So, you really had to sort of have a good, picture in your brain before it came out, because anyway.
Sorry. I was just gonna say that seems really intimidating to do caricatures. I've always thought that, because what if you piss someone off and they don't care for the likeness? Have you ever had someone like blow up on you in that situation?
No, actually, I was known as sort of the nice caricaturist. Okay. I wanted to sell everything. I was pretty cowardly. My caricatures were cute, especially when you're drawing kids. I mean, there's nothing. Like a 10-year-old girl with her mom looking over your shoulder. What are you gonna like? You're gonna make fun of the way she looks, right? Like that's
exactly.
Be careful in that situation. And similarly, I just found with adults as well. I think the worst moment I had was when I was drawing a couple's portrait of two people who were pretty overweight, and they wanted to be drawn holding hands walking on the beach. I was just like, how do I? Like I had an master. Pardon me?
How would you make it look flattering in that case?
Yeah. And I try to chat them up too, to get a sense of the limits of their sense of humor. Like, do they want me to do something that's like, because this would be a full body caricature in that case. Usually, I'm lucky enough that people want to be like in a race car or in a uniform of some kind.
A dune buggy is the one they always.
or gladiators, or just something where you can kind of, it's really more about the portrait, and then the rest is just like a generic body you throw in. But in this case, they wanted like, I want to be in a bikini. I want to be, and it's like, I didn't have any gags prepared for that because couples portraits are pretty rare anyway. So I wound up just doing a nice portrait of them. And I think, I probably slimmed them down a little bit, and they were like, meh, but I felt awful because I think at that moment I realized that it's worse to downplay somebody's, how to put it, idiosyncrasies than to do something cute with them, which is what I spoke to the other caricaturists afterwards about what they would have done, because I was mortified. I felt so bad. I don't like disappointing people in general. And in that case, I really felt like maybe I'd insulted them by not drawing them the way they see themselves, perhaps. Like I just didn't know. They're complete strangers. They weren't wearing bathing suits when they sat down for me either, right? So I was kind of like trying to not to look, but also look,
like how many rolls do we got here?
Yeah, I'm used to looking from here up, and I can, that I can get, but and I know what the threshold is, because there were artists who had their cartoons ripped up right in front of them by people who were upset.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and I never wanted that to happen to me. You don't get paid for one thing.
Who gets a caricature though? And not realizing that that's the whole point, is kind of this over the top representation, so it seems a little silly to blow up on someone.
Yeah, I think, I didn't see that particular artist's rendering. He was a pretty abrasive guy, so he may have really gone overboard. I don't know. But most people you expect when they sit down, some of them were like, bless them, they would sit down and say, all right, make me look funny. There was what's his name? There was a caricaturist that worked there, who went on to do a strip that was like in the Globe and Mail and stuff like that. I can't remember the name of it, unfortunately. It'll come to me as soon as we're done this interview.
Yeah, of course.
But he did. I don't know if it was a regular ongoing thing, but he did. It was a 3 or 4 panel strip, and he actually did one where a guy was drawing. It was Fisher. I don't know if you remember that strip, Fisher.
I don't.
Anyway, he had somebody sitting down to be drawn for a caricature, and the person looking at the caricaturist saying, "Now, don't make me look funny," and the caricaturist rolling his eyes. So obviously,
that's very similar to people who come to comedy shows and then they get offended because some joke didn't, suit their sensibilities or whatever. But it's the nature of the process of what you're about to, experience.
Oh, well, I mean, comedy blows my mind. Like, I don't know how you do what you do. Like the caricature thing, at least I'm still, I'm under sunglasses and a hat, and I'm sitting there drawing, and I'll never see these people again. And usually it's, it's not too big an audience, and, and it's cute stuff. There's, it has to be, we're representing the park, you're not going to be doing anything provocative. But,
to answer what you just said, a lot of that applies to me too. Like I'm not the most regular comic. I take hiatuses for months and then go back and dabble again. And I've never done massive crowds either, maybe 50 to 100 people at the most. I'm not doing theaters or anything like that. So I think if I did ever get to that level, I would be extremely intimidated. And I also don't go after people. I usually have my thing, my funny song or whatever. And it's not usually, I don't like skewering people, and I'm not a big crowd work person. Maybe one day, I don't know, but.
Crowd war? Is that
no, crowd work. Like I don't usually go like, yeah, so where are you from? Oh, that's a shitty job or whatever, Right. Yeah, no, that's incredible. Yeah. Well, crowd war, that piqued my interest, because that sounds like a thing that some comedians would be into. But yeah, no, I mean, I've met some stand-ups. I had a really eye-opening moment where I was invited to the home of David Hetty. I don't know if you've heard of him. I think he's based now in Montreal. Really smart comedian, and his stuff is pretty out there. Pretty, some of it's pretty dark. But he's just brilliant. Anyway, a friend of mine is good friends with him, and he had us over to his place to watch sort of a dry run of his material. Oh, nice. And he had his other comedian friends there too. And they just put like a tiny little like raised thing on the floor. It might have just been like a lamp, and that was it. That was their microphone. And we sat on a couch and had a few drinks and just watched these guys work out their material before they went on to the comedy clubs. And it was amazing. They all had their notes, like some of them had books, some of them just had scraps of paper. And I'd never seen that before. Usually that's sort of, that's sort of frowned upon when you're actually doing a club or whatever.
Even a small venue? Yeah.
I mean, it depends. If it's like an amateur night, Tuesday night kind of thing, I don't think you're going to get shit for it. But if you're doing like a featuring act on a Saturday or something, then you're supposed to have your shit together. Gotcha. You know, the only person I can think of that I've seen on TV would be like Mitch Hedberg. I remember seeing one of his gigs where he was clearly in front of like thousands of people and he still had on the stool a notepad. But that's because he's a one-liner comic. And I've always thought that's got to be so hard without any segues or storytelling. Like, to just keep
I'm smiling because that's pretty much, he's my, if I were a comedian, that's who I would aspire to be.
That does not surprise me at all, given your work.
Gags. Yeah. But yeah, no, I think I've seen that too in his stand-up where he'll just say, okay, stroke that one off. Never that joke again, which in itself is funny. Right. But I think I've seen one comedian at an actual club. It was a small venue who would take out next joke, and he'd like read it off a piece of paper kind of thing. But anyway, it just made me realize how much, like I hadn't seen, this was before Comedians in Cars Getting Coffee. I hadn't read any biographies like Steve Martin's Born Standing Up or anything like that. Like I didn't realize what went into making an act and coming up with those jokes and refining them and everything, and to see these notes and see them making notes as they went. And they didn't actually ask us for feedback or anything like that, but they get that based on your reactions, I suppose, for the most part. Yeah. I mean, the bigger audience in the room were the other comedians in that case, right? But that's sort of fed into my method with coming up with my single panel stuff, which is I don't share anything with the world until it's gone through about 10 to 15 people who I send out basically a survey monkey page to a couple times a month. People you really trust. They look through my jokes, and I'm not afraid of completely falling flat in front of them. And I know that they have warped enough senses of humor and also just the right sensibilities as well in terms of what's going on in the news and the world, that kind of thing, so that I won't, I generally won't put my foot in it too much if I do a joke that might be perceived as political or something at the time it comes out. I don't know if you can tell, but I worry a lot.
Well, I don't know. You seem like a thoughtful dude. I remember talking to you through text about a lot of your process and finding it really interesting. I was going to ask you about that because I know you told me you had like a box that you kind of keep all your ideas in. I don't know if you can elaborate on that for my audience, but I found it very interesting. Your process in general.
Joke box.
There you go.
It's kind of, I've got more than one going now because that one's almost full. And most of the jokes in it are, I don't know why, I should just burn them all because they've been sitting there so long. They're obviously not going to turn into anything.
I would love to see your stuff that didn't make the cut. I would love to.
You'd love to
see like, the cutting room floor stuff.
Yeah. And a lot of it winds up there. That's, I spoke to another cartoonist, very different types of cartoons, a guy named Ryan Harvey recently. He does, he's at I Am Honeydill on Instagram.
Okay. I think I've seen his actually. Yeah.
Yeah, he's very popular. And his stuff is more, it's a strip. It's not as, obviously not remotely as violent or dark as Bogart. They're completely different creatures.
Yeah.
But, we were talking about a process, and he might show his work to his wife before he posts it, maybe like part of the time, but otherwise he just trusts that he thinks this is funny, so he's going to share it with the world. I don't do that. I was
going to say, I could see some nervousness just in like, if you think you have a really great idea, not wanting someone else to jack it and get it up on their social media first, I mean, if you have I don't know, maybe that's my paranoia shining through here a bit.
Yeah. I don't know how competitive comic strip artists are like certainly with gag cartoons. I do a serious amount of Googling beforehand. And before any of my books come out, I make sure I post as many of those jokes on Imager or Imgur. How do you pronounce it?
I've always wondered. I think Imgur. I don't know.
Okay. Imgur sounds just weird.
Yeah.
So I say
like an ogre or something. I am Imgur.
Yeah. It's like GIF or GIF, I guess. But anyway, Imager, the audience on Imager is such an amazing hive mind. Generally pretty kind too. I mean, Reddit are funny. They can get mean, I find. But, and they also don't like violent stuff. They don't allow you to show much blood in the jokes that you post there.
Really?
They've got very strict community guidelines, and I've had to pull down because of that. So I don't generally post stuff there anymore. But Imager is much more Wild West, and they're all super nerds, and they've all seen every episode of Family Guy or Mad TV or whatever. So if something's come out before, they'll catch it, and they'll call me out.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, we have the same thing in comedy to some extent. You always are a little worried when you come up with a great bit or something like, has this been done before? Because there's just so much history, so many people doing comedy, just like there's so many people doing art and cartoons and stuff like that. So you really don't want to step on someone's toes accidentally.
Yeah, and you can't possibly know everything that's come before you, and certainly know what's happening at the same time as you. So yeah, I'm very grateful for their honesty, even though sometimes it stings a little. The worst thing is when I put out a joke and it gets past everybody, and I know it sounds stupid to complain that something goes viral, because that's always everyone's goal, but something does really, really well. It gets passed around, 100,000 reach or more. And then that one person says, oh, you know what? Off the Mark did this joke in 2016.
Oh yeah, that's gotta burn.
Are you kidding me? Even if my version was, I like my version better. It's like, damn it. Like, I didn't Google hard enough, and that's why I try to avoid puns, because generally, well, first of all, they're just dad jokes. And I try, I'm already working in single panel comics. It's already a pretty dated medium,
I think they're awesome.
They're gags though, right? Like it's not,
so that's awesome though. I used to love Bizarro for the same reason.
Bizarro does a ton of puns too.
Yeah.
A lot of dad jokes, as they would call them, right? But I like him too. I think I almost enjoy his illustrative style better than his actual jokes.
Yeah,
there's Farside people and there's Bizarro people, right? And,
I like both. Weird.
That's good.
Yeah.
Way to be. No, and I do too. I mean, there's been some absolute genius Bizarros that I've had stuck to the fridge, But yeah, I think single panels are just by their very nature, they're a bit old fashioned. And they either wind up being stuff that, like that your parents would stick to the fridge, or sort of lofty inward chuckle type stuff like you'd see in the New Yorker, but there's not anything. I don't know of many single panel comics, and maybe you can elucidate me if you have found them that are sort of cutting edge, or like, that speak to the youth of today. Like,
well, I would say yours to some degree are they're not like, political or anything, but I think that people my age or the youth, people younger than me, would thoroughly enjoy your stuff, because visually it's very engaging, and then it's kind of dark and twists your brain a little bit, So I think your stuff is pretty cutting edge, not to float your boat here, but.
Cheers. I know my demographic is generally 25 and up to 50 or something like that. So,
okay.
I know 25 happens to be, we were talking earlier about the malleability of the brain and stuff.
Yeah.
That's when your brain stops growing, right? So maybe there's some weird connection there. I don't know. I don't know, but I'm always blown away if like a teenager stops and even at an expo or something and buys a book or something like that. Cause I'm like, I don't even know what you're watching. I don't even know what you're reading. Like there's just I just discovered Rick and Morty like this last year. And I love Dan Harmon. I love Community. I've watched it numerous times, but it took me that long to get caught up. Like I'm slowing down.
Fan now, I'm guessing.
Oh, huge! Yeah, I love it.
Yeah,
absolutely. But like again, so I'll pop over to actually, I guess Imager is probably a fairly young audience. I'm guessing. And at least a pretty broad one, and they all have an equal love of pop culture. And they mentioned Rick and Morty a few times in the comments, and so maybe my stuff isn't that old.
Well, I remember Rick and Morty was getting a lot of backlash, I don't know, a couple of years ago, because they hit that point of just like uber popularity. And then you get this group of people that are just sick of hearing Rick and Morty. And probably most of them haven't taken the time to actually watch the show. But I remember after the Szechuan sauce episode came out, there was just a bunch of people that were like, oh, I'm so sick of hearing a Rick and Morty. And I don't know. I think it's a genius show for the most part.
So it's not that they jumped the shark, it's that people just got saturated with them.
Yeah, I think there's an oversaturation, probably largely due to, social media and how shit just gets crammed down your throat all the time, and you just reach a limit with stuff.
Yeah, totally. I mean, we've got pandemic fatigue kicked in around the 4-month mark.
Yeah.
People do not have attention spans like they used to. Yeah.
That's for sure. Yeah. We had Tiger King at the very beginning, and then everybody kind of just went off the rails. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. No, it's true. I mean, everybody's used to binging everything now too. So I suppose.
Has this been like a super creative time for you since, what else are you going to do when you're stuck at home? Even more art time,
Well, I don't know if I'm going to make people hate me by saying this, but if it weren't for the media, I might not have even known there was a pandemic for the first few months.
You live out in the country or something.
I'm in a village of like 100 people in the middle of the prairies. So, we're already practicing social isolation.
Yeah, effectively.
you know, it's just rarely bump into more than a handful of people in the course of a week here, you know. So yeah, so it didn't affect, and I work from home as a freelance illustrator. So it really, I mean, the only thing I was worried about at the beginning, of course, was work going to dry up. And for some reason it didn't. And in fact, it's been a pretty decent, steady flow of work this year. Because so much has shifted over to online.
Yeah.
So more and more people need material for their websites, that kind of thing. It's just, but I was doing a lot of work for filmmakers before that, and the year before that, storyboards and supporting art.
Nice.
I don't know, just graphics to be used in movies and stuff. And that came to a screeching halt at the start of the pandemic. So I was just like, I don't know, you know, like, but it's just, yeah, just dumb luck, really. So it hasn't. Yeah, fortunately, it hasn't. I can't complain. You work in medicine, or your wife does, or you both?
My fiance is a ICU nurse, so she's way more in the thick of it than I am, and she's full time. I'm, you know, a stay-at-home dad. I do this, and then I work on call in sterilization, just cleaning and reprocessing everything for its next use.
Right. So, yeah.
So I mean, go to the hospital. Yeah, it's definitely intimidating.
So it's much more real for you, and I feel guilty as hell for even saying that it hasn't really affected me, because I know like it's just been absolute hell for. I mean, and please thank your fiance on behalf of the humanity for. Yeah. And thank you too. I'm astounded
by what she does all the time when she comes home from work. You know, I'm like, how do you do what you do? But I was saying that before the pandemic, some of the shit she was dealing with just being an ICU nurse, you know what I mean? So that's cool though. Yeah. That you're kind of just safe from the pandemic. Like, I know you said you worry a lot, but it must've been kind of nice to not have to super stress about COVID hitting your small town of 100 people. Yeah.
I mean, yeah. It doesn't mean that I don't have other things to stress about. It just, that wasn't the thing that I was focusing on. It was almost like, people were wondering, like my wife, for example, she was more stressed than I was at the start of the pandemic. And I'm also a hypochondriac, so it really should have messed me up. But the thing was, I think, is that my level of stress was already here, and everybody else just kind of caught up to me.
That's sort of what I said too.
Do I look the same by comparison, or I don't know.
No, I'm a big germaphobe too. And I said the same sort of thing between my anxiety and my OCD and germophobia and whatever. I felt like I've sort of been training for this my whole life, and I'm kind of prepared in a sense. But that's funny. Yeah.
I've heard I regularly play D&D on Roll20 with some friends.
Oh, nice.
That's what you do in a pandemic. Also, when you're geographically isolated anyway, I'm playing with people 2,000 kilometers away. And one of them, he's a total introvert. And at the start of the pandemic, he basically said, I feel like I've been training my whole life for this. Like word for word, what you just said.
Yeah.
I don't know if you qualify yourself as an introvert, but
I wouldn't say that, no, but germaphobe, which people always think that's ridiculous when I say that I work in sterilization then, but I think there's some sort of cathartic part of cleaning the stuff and being, you know, like, oh, but we're making it safe again. So I don't know, but yeah,
Were you a germaphobe before you got that job, or did the job make you a germaphobe?
I'd say I've had it always a little bit. You know, I was always a hand sanitizer kind of guy. Well, people are gross. Again, before a pandemic, there's the amount of guys I see not washing their hands in the friggin' bathroom is enough to make me want to carry sanitizer.
Yeah.
You know? Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know where that guy's junk's been. Like, I don't want to shake hands with him. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah. No, I agree. Like, well, yeah. I mean, yeah. You hit the nail on the head. People are gross. We are all gross.
I mean, yeah, I'm not excluding myself from that. That's a funny thing that I've always thought is something that everyone frowns on nose picking. And I want to say like 98% of the population do it with vigor when they're alone, you know? Yeah, why can't we become a nation of proud pickers, you know? It's just
just own it.
Yeah, really. Everybody friggin' does. It's like farting. Like, you're gonna try and tell me you don't fart, and then when you fart, you don't kind of enjoy it and feel this relief, you know? Yeah. No one wants some little crusty thing stuck up in their nostril, and you can't always get it with a Kleenex, you know?
No, you cannot. It's true.
Sometimes you need that. Anyway. Now I'm being gross. I was gonna say, I wanted to know, because I read that you grew up near an actual Bogart Creek. In Markham, right? Or was it New? I wrote this down somewhere. Newmarket. That's what.
Yes, actually, one second. I have a prop. Hang on.
Oh, nice.
I discovered this in the basement the other day. This is a painting I did of Bogart Creek when I was, I think, in like early high school. So that's it. It was it was in the farmlands behind my parents' place when I was growing up, from the age of about I don't know, grade 4, so 9 to 18. And then developers came in and turned it all into ticky-tackies and everything. But for a while, Bogart Creek's probably still there. That's the only thing they can't build on.
Well, I was just more curious what led you to choosing that as the title of your strip. Was it just like a tribute to those formative years of your life, or was it, yeah?
Yeah, basically. I mean, I have personal significance, and legally, you can't copyright a creek. So it wasn't like I was naming it after Newmarket or something like that, which could get me into trouble, I think. But because there's like a Bogart Creek in the States too, I think, and there's also Bogart Town, and like Bogart Creek kind of meanders around Southern Ontario a little bit. But for me, yeah, I think it was a cool sounding phrase, and a lot easier to say than my last name. And also, yeah, those are my formative creative years. And a lot of it had to do with being out in the farmlands, unsupervised, getting soakers in Bogart Creek, falling through the ice and losing boots and that kind of thing. And just generally, finding ourselves without, helicopter parents hovering and that kind of thing. My folks were really hands off in that regard. And, also like, I'm a big supporter of the environment, for lack of a better term, and nature. It's where I think anybody who spends enough time wandering around a forest, their imagination also does a lot of wandering. And
nature in general. Yeah.
Yeah. So we had a lot of, crazy, games out there, fighting dragons and stuff like that, whatever we could think of. We had bows and arrows and we're shooting at haystacks, and it was just, it was a really privileged space to have growing up. So I'm nostalgic about it and sentimental, and I figured that was my playground growing up, so it'll be my playground virtually now.
There you go. Yeah, I was going to say it's kind of nice to have just a random title if all your comics are kind of not really connected to each other and just all over the place. It's, kind of the way you want to go.
Yeah. I think I wrote down about 50 possible names, and it almost was smash cuts. Like a film reference, smash cut, That was the runner up for Bogart Creek. And I thought it just didn't feel quite like, it felt like that could still be not an adequate name, depending, because I hadn't really even done that many cartoons yet. It hadn't become its own thing yet, whereas Bogart Creek's a bit more open-ended and it has personal connection. So, cool. And also I was a big fan of Bloom County growing up, and that sort of refers to this magical other place, and Bogart Creek kind of had that same kind of feeling.
Yeah, it's a great name. I actually, like I told you, have been inspired to do my own. Originally, I was going to try and draw them out and share them here, but I figured, for people that are just listening, that might be a little underwhelming. Yeah, likewise, I wanted to mention a few of yours, and I will mention a few of yours that I love, but you can't really do it justice, At least for the YouTube, I can throw up some pictures of your stuff so people will see what we're talking about. But I always try to be considerate of the audio-only people.
Right.
But I do have some I'll share with you. Like once we're done the actual interview, I'll tell you some of my ideas and you can let me know what you think.
Cool.
They're still just conceptual. I haven't drawn them out yet, but the name that I came up with, because that's the kind of guy I am, I come up with the name for my thing before I've even drawn a single one. My daughter helped me is Noodle Nugget or Noodle Nuggets. As in like, your noodle and just a little. So it's
playful and whimsical.
Yeah, that's what I thought. And I Googled it and I didn't find anybody using that. So hopefully stay tuned and I'll have some noodle nuggets for people before too long.
Excellent. You heard it here first, people.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking to your dark nature, I read that you stay away from sexual stuff and you stay away from swearing for the most part, which is fine. But I found it I just wanted to know why when you don't shy away from violence and dark natured stuff. So what was that decision? What was sort of the factor that led to that decision?
I know it's like I'm unsyndicatable one way or another. Right?
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Yeah.
Why not go all in? Right. I just find it goes back to that, maybe if I were in Europe, where sexuality isn't such a taboo, I wouldn't feel so averse to exploring that stuff. But here, it's a cliche. I don't know who said it originally, but that thing that it's easier in a movie or on TV to show someone stabbing a breast than kissing a breast, right? Like it's just people really are super sensitive to sexuality, and as am I. Like it's product of my environment and so forth. I'm not saying that I'm not a churchgoer or anything like that. I'm no saint, but I just feel like, I don't know, it's just one of those rules that you make for yourselves to sort of, because it's not the only, those aren't the only rules that I have. But it just feels like that type of humor, I'm not submitting to Penthouse or Playboy or
that's fair,
no National Lampoons or anything like that. So where's it going to land? And there are some amazing cartoonists who are somehow able to like cover like the whole spectrum of humor. Like Tom Chaney is someone I really admire. He's been in the New Yorker. He's been in Penthouse. I think maybe even Hustler. Like he's like, I don't know how, but he's managed to like, he can do the most sort of like dark and twisted stuff. And then the next minute, I have a book of philosophy that I forget what it's called. I Draw, Therefore I Am, I think, where they talk about philosophical concepts and they start each chapter with a single panel cartoon, and his work's in there. Right. So lofty and lowbrow at the same time, like it's incredible, but I don't know many people that can do the tightrope walk. And I certainly don't have that good balance. I feel like maybe I'm just too circumspect. I don't want to set my future self up any more than necessary for a good, public lashing. I
suppose swearing doesn't really add for the most part to
swearing just feels a bit. Yeah. I mean, I do have it here and there, but I always feel a little bit guilty because it feels like a bit of a crutch.
Just like needlessly gratuitous, almost. Yeah. Yeah,
like there are times when you hear the dialogue in your head, and there's no other way to do it unless there's a swear word in there. And then even then, I sometimes just obscure it with the ampersands and the hashtags and stuff.
Yeah.
So, or just hashes, I guess, they're not hashtags. But yeah.
No, but I know you mean the. I almost wanted to say wingdings, but that's not it. That's that old stupid font on.
Yeah.
Who used wingdings? Was that like for secret code messages or something? I never understood that.
Maybe something the kids were into at the time. I don't know.
Yeah.
But I've got a few rules like that. And another one that I have to remind myself often of is always be punching up, the underdog is the champion, and the victims of any violence have to be, frankly, me, like straight white guys, like that's just, or a bear or an eagle.
Yeah.
Or something
but
like
even
that,
then you usually have like the smaller animal kicking the bigger animal's ass or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And that goes to my own, upbringing too. Like, I wasn't one of, I got beat up in public school now and then, and I know what it's like to be bullied, and so you don't side with the big tough guys. You side with the underdogs. It's also just generally funnier to see an underdog having revenge, or just to see a jerk get his comeuppance. And we're all jerks. Like I'm not saying that I'm very often drawing myself in those cases. Someone who's obliviously walking into a catastrophe, or has just walked into a catastrophe. Those tend to be the yin yang of my jokes.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. I like how you summed that up. I was going to, yeah. In relation to your dark humor of everything you do, I wanted to know if there was ever a specific comic that you just couldn't bring yourself to put out there, even though you liked the joke a lot, but you thought it was just over the top,
Yeah, I've had a few, and I won't describe them.
You are okay,
because they'll be there for all time. The internet never forgets, right?
Yeah. But not that many people watch my show, so.
Then you'll get famous, and then I'll be dragged into the spotlight.
But I mean, discussing it's not the same as actually drawing it out,
True, although sometimes actually, I think seeing the cartoon, rather than saying it, describing it could be worse than seeing it. I don't know. Like the idea is worse than the actual execution.
Yeah.
I don't know, but there aren't that many. I've gotten pretty good at. I mean, I don't try to shock people. First of all, it's pretty much impossible to shock anybody nowadays. I'm always amazed when somebody does get outraged by something I've drawn, because it's like, really, like you haven't
compared to real world events.
Yeah. But like I said, I trust my reviewers, my little comedy club of reviewers who they're all very smart and sensitive people, and but they're not uptight, and they'll let me know when I've gone too far. But it's not very often. And then usually what they'll say is, yeah, you're punching down here, And I'm like, oh yeah, you're right. A few have gotten by that even they didn't catch, that other people then were offended by. I guess I can mention one since it was around. I've taken it down, but I didn't think much of it at the time, but I did a joke. it was a bunch of, you might have seen it, it was like 3 students, all of them, you know, like sort of, they looked like adult students sitting at some desks with musical instruments on the desks. And standing behind them are a bunch of big guys in lab coats with rocks over their heads. And in front of them is sort of the head of the lab saying, you know, welcome to the Sudden Savant School of Music. Yeah, these can be bopped on the head, and now you can play piano, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Which is
you got an autistic backlash from this, I'm guessing. Yeah,
not like a landslide, but one lady posted that it upset her because she has an autistic child, and I was like, oh, delete. You know, like it just hadn't occurred to me because it is an actual medical thing. I wasn't trying to. I just didn't think. You know, I just didn't think, and it didn't offend anybody who had seen it. You know, before it went up, and I felt really bad. You know, because
I saw that. I do remember seeing that one, and it crossed my mind. But I guess unless you're really close to that issue, it's not going to solicit the same response. You know.
Well, I didn't even think like savantism and autism were the same thing. Like I still don't know if.
I think there's a link sometimes. I don't know if it's.
Exactly of course, that's true. You can have people who are super genius at something who are.
I think there's a lot of autistic folks who are somewhat savant at one thing, but then struggle in other sort of more regular day-to-day.
Yeah, and there's nothing funny about that whatsoever. My joke was supposed to be about, and here I am defending it, which is never good, but was just supposed to be about how people are lazy and take shortcuts. That's all. You know, and I learned guitar, right, the hard way. I took classical guitar lessons, and I went on to electric because my dad wouldn't let me jump ahead. You know, he said, no, you got to start with the foundation, and then you can have fun with the power chords. But if someone had just said, hey, I could just bop you on the head like Bugs Bunny, and you'd suddenly be good at it. You know, how many people would take that option, right? That's what the joke was supposed to be about. But I just didn't put myself in enough people's shoes when I drew it. And that's a nightmare. Like I always feel anxiety when I put something out, even though I run it past all these people, because I don't want to punch down, like I said.
No, I'm very much the same way as you. And like, especially in the world of comedy, I've seen lots of comics and met lots of comics and talked with lots of comics that they don't give a shit if they offend people. They're like, if it's funny, I'm putting it out there and people can go fuck themselves, you know, and I've never been able to align myself with that just because I'm a really sensitive person and I hate getting my feelings hurt. So I'm always kind of like, oh, I'm going to offend someone. And I think you should, you know, ride that line a little bit, but I was actually going to say along the line of autistic savants. I don't know if you've ever seen, but I watched something and it was related to art as well. There was an autistic savant who they took him up in, I don't know if they took him in a helicopter or something like that. And he saw the skyline of New York and then he was able to just draw it.
Every window. Yeah.
Isn't that incredible? Insanity?
Yeah. No, that stuff's fascinating. I've read Oliver Sacks, you know, the writer he wrote, I think he was a neuroscientist. But don't quote me on that. He wrote a lot about that type of thing. It's fascinating. Absolutely amazing what the human mind is capable of and how little we understand. Like 2021's around the corner and we still don't have a really.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. Relating to what we were talking about before with the social media and all that stuff, there's so much we don't know about the brain. And in the case of someone like that guy who can just draw the whole skyline, it would appear that some part of his brain is so heightened, almost superhuman, but then does that come at the cost of other parts of the brain not being able to fire fully or whatever you want to, however you want to describe that, you know?
Yeah, I'm sure. I mean, he's got a lot of attention and support and that sort of thing. So I don't know what his life is like on a daily basis. I would wonder if he would choose being normal if he was given the option. Yeah. You know,
well, normal, I guess, is the wrong term too.
Well, it's a terrible word. Yeah. But I mean, I think about it too, because I'm so neurotic, you know, it's like, would I rather be a balanced person without the daily, hourly worries that I have if it meant that, you know, I wasn't, you know, able to do funny cartoons?
Yeah. There's no Bogart Creek.
What if they're connected? You know, what if it turns out that, if I was quote unquote normal, sorry, I guess, is that a bad word now? Did I step in it? Anyway,
whatever.
It's a lowercase normal. That's all. Yeah. It's a meaningless word like nature, you know, but it's, but there it is. What I mean is just like be more average, I guess, be more like just balanced. Like when you go to therapy, when you go to therapy, what they try to get you to, you know, where the range of extreme reactions aren't so great. So you don't, you're not maladaptive is the word I think that they throw at. Right?
Yeah, well, I would say it's definitely linked to your creative output, as is the case with so many creative types. Comedians, I don't know that I've ever met a comedian that didn't have a bunch of issues, myself included. Whether it's mental health stuff or traumatic upbringing or whatever. And I would say probably applies to music, at least really passionate artists that are the legendary ones. They all had drug issues or whatever else,
If they didn't when they started, they did when they finished.
Yeah, exactly. When someone brings a suitcase of, Raoul Duke, from Fear and Loathing, just pretty much smorgasbord, whatever you want, I guess people get tempted.
Land extract.
Well, that's actually something I forgot to mention when I was talking about you choosing to put dark stuff, but excluding swearing and sexuality, but then you include violence and you often also include drugs. So that was sort of another part of that I was...
Have I often included drugs?
Well, one of my favorites that I did write down was the one where the guy's in the space station saying like, hey, the good news is we're way ahead of schedule. The bad news is Anderson spilled his cocaine and it's just floating around. Made me think of The Simpsons actually with the potato chips and all the ants that got in there.
Yeah, you can see Homer Simpson going around snorting up all the coke in the air. I forgot about that one. And I also did an LSD one where the guys in a police lineup.
The police lineup. Oh my God.
And I also did one where guys were snorting and shooting up life cereal to determine whether you can get high on life.
I have not seen that one. That's awesome.
I don't even know I don't know if it's still up, but yeah, it was it did okay,
Well, yeah, I didn't mean to imply that you have like heavily drug influenced stuff, but it was clearly something that you didn't have a hard rule about not including,
Yeah, no, I consumed cannabis for many years before it was legalized, so I'd be a hypocrite if I was judgmental about that stuff. Although I don't have any weed jokes because weed's just not that shocking, I guess.
Yeah.
But yeah, LSD and cocaine are pretty out there. So if I'm going to do or shooting live cereal, I suppose, which I can't imagine is a good idea.
That's funny. There's one of the funniest weed jokes I remember was from some Seth MacFarlane animated short DVD. It just had a bunch of little things. I assume that he could never fit into Family Guy. And there's these cops in an interrogating room and they've got Bob Marley there and they're talking about the lyrics to I Shot the Sheriff. They're like, I don't get it. He's confessing to one crime to try to get out of the other. I shot the sheriff, but I didn't shoot the deputy. And then the other cop says, yeah, I don't get it either. And I have the sneaking suspicion that he's high or something like along those lines. Man. So speaking of drugs and weed though, yeah, we should touch on this. So how I initially know you or came into contact with you is we were both in this cannabis competition, I guess you would call it.
Right.
And run by a company called AHLOT, which I think stands for a higher level of thought. They were cool guys. And it was, whoever wins, I think they said 5 people originally, that those people would get free weed essentially for a year if you just do reviews for them and sort of.
That wasn't exact. I don't know what they said initially, but that wasn't what it wanted. I mean,
well, this is what I was going to ask you because you beat me. We were both in the creative category with some other woman who had a dance studio or something like that. And I was so burned too because there was 3 of us in the category and both of you.
I didn't know it came down to just the 3 of us. Oh, I'm sorry, man.
Well, at the time it was crushing, but it actually propelled me to get back into doing comedy and starting this show and all that. So it wound up being a really good thing for me. But I've always wondered ever since sort of how it panned out because in the back of my mind, I was always wondering, was this just a publicity stunt for them in the end?
No, not at all. They're totally serious. And it wound up being, I think it was more than, can't remember the exact number, but it was more than 5 people.
Yeah, it was like 8 I think in the end.
Yeah, they wanted to broaden it out more. I'm kind of embarrassed to talk about it because, after, like I said, 25 years of consuming cannabis, finally it's legal and I've landed this incredible opportunity to be a cannabis, evaluator with this incredible group of people. And it happened around that time that for whatever reason, weed started making me paranoid. I started cutting back and then it started affecting my sleep. I don't know. I don't want to put the blame on that though. I think it's really just that I'm 47. So who knows what's gone on up here.
Did you start young though? Because I started young and I think that might have been like, I always wonder if I started smoking weed at 25 when the brain was done developing, if I'd still be fine. Because I'm having a lot of similar issues. We talked about this before we started recording, but so I've always wondered, did you start when you were like a teenager like me?
No, I was squeaky clean as a teen. I
Okay.
I was a virgin till I was 20. I didn't drink till university. Like, yeah, no, I hit university running, and that's when I discovered all that stuff, and including alcohol and everything else. And yeah, I mean, at the time, I felt like it really balanced me out. You know, and it did. I'm a neurotic guy, and it calmed me down. It numbed me, though. That's what I sort of realized. And when I was in Toronto, you know, an introvert in Toronto, surrounded by 6 million people, no wonder I was numbing myself, right? And I was also I was really worked up all the time. My friends would have described me as angry. And by the time I moved out here to this very quiet, you know, countryside place, the anger went, but in its place came anxiety. And, you know, it was probably there all along. It was just that the anger was drowning it out. I'm not saying I've never been in a physical fight or anything like that, but I was just
frustration and angst.
Yeah, it was just, it was just like, yeah, it was not a positive environment for me. You know, and it just got me really worked up to the point of it being completely irrational. And, you know, I'm still completely irrational, but just now it's more about worrying about stuff like, health issues, or the internet, or I don't know, like what if a tree falls on our house? You know, like there's always, that's the Bogart Creek mentality, right? It's that kind of, the sky is about to fall, and not just fall, but like fall up directly on your head kind of thing. And that's
were you like a huge pothead though? Like, did you sort of, you know, use every day for a couple decades? Cause that's what I'm starting to wondering, was maybe my downfall was just not taking proper detoxification breaks like a lot of my friends would do. And just, maybe because of my OCD, but I became just self-medicated. And only a couple months ago now, maybe 6 weeks even, I was going to get some new headshots done, and I was drinking too much because of the pandemic as well. And I said, you know what? I want to look good in these headshots. So I'm going to clean up my act. I'm going to cut down on weed for, thank you, for, you know, a little bit. And I think that actually triggered something that kind of caused me to spiral out for the last month and a half, because all of a sudden this system I had set up that was impenetrable now was just crumbling around me. And I'm going like, wow, like what's wrong with me? Am I not okay to just be whoever I am underneath all of this? You know, like, so it's
we're in the exact same, everything you just said, same thing here. And the tragic thing is that, I mean, what really broke the camel's back with me was that, you know, it started messing with my sleep, and I thought I had a serious sleep disorder. It turned out, you know, that it was just, we know so little about how cannabis really does affect the mind, despite the fact that it's been around for so long.
And it can be therapeutic.
I don't want to stand here and say it's bad, because I still miss it. I probably will come back to it someday. I'm taking a break right now.
Yeah.
And so long story short, you know, I thoroughly enjoyed getting to meet the other the curation committee at AHLOT, and the people at AHLOT are incredible and so knowledgeable about all things cannabis. Like, it was humbling, frankly. Like, I mean, yeah, I had a lot of years of experience enjoying the stuff, but just, you know, like the level of like chemistry understanding that some of those guys had was really profound, you know?
Yeah, they seem like they had a good team.
Yeah, and they still do. They still do. I'm not among them. That's the only.
But wasn't it only supposed to be for a year anyways?
It originally, yeah. Originally, I don't know, it was an experiment or whatever, but yeah, they just said for a year, but it's still ongoing.
Okay.
Yeah, cool. They are very, very, I can't speak to their process or whatever. I'll just say they're very thorough, and very conscientious about how they're looking at everything that's put in front of them. I think it's a really smart way to go about doing what they're doing. I have a tremendous amount of guilt because I had to step back, you know, and, you know, like, who would do that? Right. Like, it's a dream job for anybody.
Right for you though.
Pardon me?
You got to do what's right for you. I mean, you know, you can't just feel like you're bound to that just for the sake of, oh, well, I signed up for it. Like, if it's like you said, you're losing sleep and stuff like that, you got to reach a limit at some point.
Well, that's what happens when anyway, I won't go too far into it, but just suffice to say that the folks at AHLOT were absolutely supportive, incredible people.
That's awesome.
Completely understanding. They, you know, health is first and foremost, you know, the most important thing in their mind. So yeah, I consider them all good friends.
That's awesome.
Wish them nothing but the best. And I'm still sorry that I don't get to join in on those monthly meetings, but it just wasn't the right time for me right now.
Yeah, no, I haven't talked to as many of them as you are, but I'm friends with Chad on Facebook, and he seems like a really radical dude. But But with the sleep stuff, I wanted to ask you, because I know this has been true to me, and I'm pretty sure it's documented that after about a week of no weed, you start having really intense dreams.
Oh yeah, REM rebound. Yeah.
Did that happen to you? Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. And it wasn't even just quitting; it was cutting back. Because I thought, first of all, like doing it every day is not a good idea. If it's not like, if you're tasting wine, you don't drink the whole bottle, and you spit it out, you cleanse your palate, and then you go back in, right? And like I said, after getting away from the city, I started to sort of chill out, and yet get in the process sort of do a lot more soul searching and sort of come face to face a bit more with my overall anxieties. And I thought, well, I'll cut back and just use the weed more strategically. And I think in the process of doing so, then
your tolerance goes down. That's what happened to me. I had the same approach, and then every time I would try to revisit, it was like even more intense, and it's become kind of this cycle now where I'm like really, really cautious about what I put in.
Which is not a bad thing. I mean, it's like saying that your palate becomes more sensitive or something, right? But again, that was happening towards the end of my, the time that I was with AHLOT. And while it made for I think it made me a pretty good, accurate evaluator of everything, because I was more of a clean slate every time I approached it. There was no sort of lag from whatever I might have had the day before or earlier that day or anything like that. But yeah, I felt I was a lightweight all of a sudden for the first time in my life, and my dreams were becoming vivid, and my sleep more shallow. Like I was basically sedating myself before that. Right?
Yeah, same here. Well, and
during the day and at night.
I don't know if this happened to you too, but I found that when I stopped, it may have helped a bit, but I realized that there was still tons of underlying anxiety. So the other sort of good part of it was that it caused me to go, okay, well, stopping weed isn't going to fix this completely. Exactly. Now I need to try to start meditating or working out more or all of that kind of stuff. So
check. I agree. Yeah. And I started exercising daily, doing yoga, meditating instead of medicating, and that's been that's sort of how I've switched over. And there's a lot of people who do all that and enjoy weed, and power to them. They've got it figured out.
And maybe that will be something, like you said, that we revisit at a different chapter in our life. I could imagine when my kids are all moved out and I'm like a retiree, probably hitting the blunts pretty hard. I don't know.
The older folks that I know, I mean, I'm old, but older than me, who enjoy weed just seem like the happiest people on earth.
Yeah. I think part of that is just growing too, because, like the sky is falling stuff. I have a lot of just existential fear about aging and death and all that. And I think a lot of old people seem so chill and happy, like seniors and stuff. Like they've just reached a limit of worrying about that stuff and got to a point where they're like, you know what? I've wasted enough hours or days or years of my life worrying, and I'm done. I don't have as much left. I think that's got to be refreshing, The other thing I found about weed that I didn't appreciate anymore was that because of that daily medication and kind of living in a bit of a fog, I found it affects my sense of time, where all of a sudden I'll be like, wow, that year went by fast. Or just someone will tell me, hey, remember that time? And I'm like, I honestly don't. And I'm thinking, I don't want my kids to be graduating or getting married. And I feel like this decade just went by. So I'm trying to, and also just remembering to keep changing and growing as a person. I don't know why I was so stuck. I guess because it was my identity, but I felt like I would be betraying this like stoner. I'm a stoner. Like when I started comedy, all my jokes at the beginning of comedy were all like, I literally would just say to the audience, hey, I'm a stoner. That was probably my first joke ever. I had, a hoodie and a toque. I looked like an obvious stoner.
I watched that. Yeah.
Yeah. And that joke about I'm a stoner. And then people would just laugh at that. And then I'd say, sorry, I didn't want you guys to confuse me with that straight edge hacky sack champion.
I like a bit about the rowing machine, the time traveling rowing machine at the gym.
Yeah.
That actually reminded me how fun it is to use weed. Like your head does go off in wild places and you really enjoy the moment. There's a lot of, goddamn, some of the happiest times of my life have been, on weed. But at the same time,
But when it switches to this gear of like fear, it's like, why am I doing this? I don't want to live in fear all the time. And that's where I think psychedelics can be much more helpful,
was Michael Pollan's book, Change Your Mind, is all about that.
Yeah, I was just watching
How to Change Your Mind. Sorry?
I was just watching literally last night him it wasn't just him, it was a bunch of guys they were interviewing about psychedelics and sort of the new wave and the resurgence of that in a medical sense. And
yeah, really fascinating. There's a really good the Stuff You Should Know podcast.
Yes, I've heard of it.
Yeah, they've got at least one really good one on LSD and the history of it, and how it was looked at as a very serious psychological tool for a while until Timothy Leary started giving the stuff out for free. Yeah, and turning it into a recreational nightmare, and then of course Nixon and them all clamped down on it, right? Yeah, but up until then, a lot of people like Cary Grant, for example, apparently had like 100 supervised LSD trips.
Really?
Yeah, he swore by the stuff. Him and his wife both were big into, sorting their stuff out.
It's a wonderful life.
That way, yeah. No, that's Jimmy Stewart. That'd be amazing.
Oh, damn it. I was thinking, God damn it, I was going to get that reference wrong.
Oh, well, we know he did it too, but... LSD is interesting. I mean, it's definitely a whole other kettle of fish, that's for sure.
Well, I just saw in that video last night that they were talking about LSD and how the molecule looks very much like a serotonin molecule, and that it actually fits the receptor more perfectly than serotonin itself in our brain. So that's a trip on.
Yeah, and the way the weed does stuff, because you've got an endocannabinoid system of your own, right? That's why
animals, I think,
well with us, is that we actually can produce our own equivalents to. I forget what it's called. The chemical that's the central component in your brain when you're high. But
I don't know. I always hear dopamine and serotonin thrown around the most, but I don't.
Well, yeah, those. I mean, it definitely all comes down to those. But anyway, our bodies can naturally create those chemicals. It's just a lot. Don't quote me. I'm not a doctor.
No, yeah.
Little that I've Googled, and I don't Google much anymore because it freaks me out every time I do. I've actually had to swear off Googling medical conditions because I go down rabbit holes, man. And
hypochondria, yeah.
My wife comes home and I'm just like a wreck because I think I'm dying of 5 different things, So, no, it's true. Anyway, left to its own devices, our brains can produce the same kind of high-inducing chemicals that weed does. It's not as quick and it's not as efficient as actually smoking this stuff or eating stuff. Yeah.
I had always heard, I don't know, again, I'm not going to try to quote like a doctor or anything, but when I was a teenager, people would always say about mushrooms that it wasn't actually the mushroom getting you high. It was what your body's releasing to fight the toxins in the mushroom. But I don't know if that's accurate or not. So I don't want to,
I've never heard that, but that's cool if that's true.
Yeah, I should look that up before throwing that out there.
It's funny that we, all the different ways. I mean, humans aren't unique. Animals seek this stuff out too, right? They'll eat rotting fruit so they get drunk and pass out.
Like the elephants or something.
Birds and monkeys and elephants, they all do it apparently. Yeah, like everybody wants to escape. It's understandable. Life is freaky, no matter whether you're human or a monkey, right?
True, but I would think that if you're especially like a prey type animal, that it would be dangerous, disadvantageous to get all fucked up and then have some lion just find passed out under the tree.
But they do it. I guess sometimes the pros are bigger than the cons, I guess.
Yeah, I guess the monkey just wants to trip.
Yeah, I mean, how many times do those water buffalo have to go up to that water wondering, is today the day?
Yeah.
The alligator, the crocodile going to get me? You might want to be a little bit stoned before you make that dive.
Do you, I don't know if you follow Nature is Metal on Instagram, but
I've come upon it a few times. Yeah. Yeah.
It's dark shit. I only follow it to try to kind of remind myself that like life is harsh. And the guy does great write-ups too. If you read his things underneath, there's a lot of work that goes into it, but it's hard to watch sometimes. But I kind of say, well, you know what? Like life is hard to live sometimes. So it's a nice refresher to just seize the day, so to speak.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Well, we had actually just yesterday, one part of I follow the Alberta Birds Facebook group just because I love birds. I'm an amateur birder. I don't have any like fancy.
The ornithologist, is that the
ornithologist?
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
Ornithologist with an O. And we had looking out the window yesterday. My wife actually woke me up to say there's something weird going on in the yard. Went out and there was this big. It looked like a great big sparrow eating a little sparrow. And it had taken the corpse of this little sparrow and hung it up in a crook of a tree branch on the ground, like a lilac branch. And it was just picking it apart, like ripped its head off and everything. It was just like, this is, like it's this adorable, fluffy, cute thing, but it's just mangling this, like it's obviously killed this other cute little thing. And was like, man, nature is messed up. So I couldn't figure out what it was using my birder app. And so I went on to she's a great photographer. She grabbed the telephoto lens, and I posted the pictures up on the Alberta Birds page. And immediately people were saying, oh, it's a northern shrike, also known as the butcher bird or Vlad the Impaler. And apparently they'll catch a mouse and impale it on a thorn of a thorn bush or something like that. Wow. And they use it like a tool so they can then go ahead and just chow down. And resoundingly through the whole comment section, everybody was just like, nature's brutal, Yeah,
I saw a video recently of a praying mantis just feasting on like a hummingbird or something like that. And eating it alive. And the guy's description again made it even darker, because he described the way that they eat as much like a bear, where they just kind of dig in, they hold you with their things, and they just start eating you alive.
I didn't know they were strong enough to grab a hummingbird.
It might have been some other kind of bird, but it was bigger than the praying mantis as far as it looked. Wow. And it was really weird to see. Yeah.
Damn. Yeah.
Praying mantises are ruthless.
They are. Yeah. Well, I did a praying mantis joke not too long ago.
Yeah,
I mean, it's almost a trope or something, they kill their lovers. Right.
Yeah.
They're cool looking though. I remember finding them when I was a kid.
I found one last summer just out here. I couldn't believe it.
Oh, jealous.
Yeah. They're kind of like, I don't want to say I was intimidated, but like he kind of turned and looked at me and I was like, all right.
Easy now.
Yeah. I don't want no trouble.
Putting the gun down. Yeah. Yeah. No, it's, nature is something else. That's for sure. We are part of it.
Getting back to your awesome comic strip, or I guess comic strip isn't the right word, but it, in that family still.
The distinction between single panel and multi-panel, I think, is kind of arbitrary. I know like Scott McCloud talks about how like single panel comics are not true comics. They're cartoons because there's no sequence. Oh, but I did a thing at the Edmonton Expo. I did a little single panel. It was just me and my publisher talking about single panel comics and their place in comics. And I took one of my strips or my single panel pieces, and I broke it up where your eye naturally goes and the saccades across the page. If you take each of those beats, because each joke usually has about 3, because comedy goes in 3s. Yeah. You break it up and it's a 3-panel comic, and it still does the same job. It's just I have it in 1 border instead of 3 borders, but it's still, you know what I mean? So
you can dance it kind of,
strip is if you can call it a strip in that respect, why not?
Yeah.
Certainly call it a comic, damn it.
Yeah, for sure. And well, I got a couple more questions about that then. One was just elaborating why you chose to go that route, and if you ever toyed with the idea of doing multi-panel. And then as a follow-up question, do you have a comic of yours that is at the top of the pile that you're just the most proud of putting out there?
Well, yeah, I can answer both of those. I guess I did try the multi-panel thing back in the day, and I'm just not a natural storyteller, really. I like coming up with a lot of different, and also usually when you've got a strip, you've got recurring characters, you've got a lot more dialogue. Like I was a huge fan of Calvin and Hobbes, still am. Bill Watterson's illustrative style is a massive influence on me. But the actual, the art of setting up a punchline over that many panels is a whole completely different kettle of fish from doing it at a glance in 1 panel. Even though I just got through saying that your eye bounces through the stages, it's still a single panel is meant to be digested in about 3 seconds, unless it's got a paragraph of text underneath it. Whereas with you have to really be more aware of the pacing with, a 4 or 5 panel or 6 panel strip. So I just found that the lack of commitment required with single panel comics, in terms of telling a story, in terms of your characters, in terms of the world, the universe you have to create, and all of the, the rules that govern it are out the window. You're much more free with single panel comics. And as far as the ones that I'm most proud of, I think it's usually ones that don't have words, because I have a pretty tin ear. I think that's the right word when it comes to dialogue. I'm maybe getting a little bit better at it, but generally just less is more. Even with it's just descriptive, caption text at the bottom. I feel like if the more words I use, the more I'm really explaining the joke. Yeah. So if it can be done without any words at all, then I've really pulled something off. And, it'll appeal to people who don't speak English and all this other stuff. So
that's true.
One of the first ones that I ever did was and I know I just posted a window washer joke. And it was the very first window washer joke that I did was, and I was proud of it for a couple of reasons. One is that it didn't just come out, like perfect at the beginning. I actually had to work on it for quite a while. And usually that kills the joke, but in this case it made it better. And secondly, it's so subtle, and it's all about the expression on the window washer's face. And I don't know if you remember it, but, or you've seen it, but it's, window washer you're inside an office, standing behind a guy, and he's looking out at a window washer who's looking at him. But the window washer is kind of trying not to stare directly at him because that guy has just shot another guy. Like he's witnessed a murder from outside the building.
Yeah, I have.
He's standing there just like with the window, with the squeegee in his hand.
Like, I didn't see anything.
Do I go down? Do I go up? Is he just going to shoot me through the glass? Like, it's just this whole weird scene. And it just tells this story in like 3 beats. And I was just like, and I knew there was something funny about window washers because they come up behind you. When I used to work in an office building that was all glass, and they come up behind you and it's weird. They're just right there. They can look at your computer. They can see what you're doing. It's like they're hanging out on the other side of the fence, and
well, yeah, you can imagine some office affair going on or some guy jerking off or something. And then,
God knows what they see. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so I was trying to come up with all the different, moments that a window washer that you could convey in a single panel joke. And then I just drew a murder and that was it. And so, but because I had to work on that one so much and it still came out just right, that felt like a sort of a benchmark for me, or a watermark, or whatever I don't know what the terminology.
Well, it's interesting too that you started off by saying that you're not really much of a storyteller, because I would argue the opposite, that, your single panel stuff definitely tells a story, but you're putting a little more of the onus on the viewer, and they kind of fill that in their head a little bit. And, there's definitely still a story being told, but you're not feeding it in that, such a linear fashion or whatever.
Fair enough. Thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, you definitely never want to hold hands. Hold the viewer's hands. And if I get somebody saying, one or two people saying, I don't get it, and, God bless them, the other viewers jumping in and saying, well, here's what's going on, or maybe it's just a pop cultural reference that people don't get. There's that too sometimes. I almost feel like I've done a better job than if everybody gets it, because then maybe it's too obvious. Not that I'm trying to be like elitist or anything. No,
I think there's something satisfying too about figuring out humor, and being like, oh, I get it. That's a good feeling for people.
Yeah, and it works for me too that way, like trying to figure out just how to get the most release, to leave out as much information as possible so that people have that aha moment when they get to the joke. I guess when you're doing stand-up, it's you set up the story such that people don't see the final twist, right? Where they don't see what's coming.
Well, I mean, there's so many different kinds of comedy, but for the most part, that sort of the twist at the end, the reveal,
Yeah, like the Bob Newhart approach, although he's also about the process. And I think that's more like doing a strip, telling the story, having a funny voice through every panel. Yeah. That type of humor that Bob Newhart did or does, that's an art, and it's an art form unto itself, very different from, say, the Mitch Hedberg approach, where it's really just about the ideas and just getting out these crazy ideas as fast as you can. That's what I've always been pretty good at. So that's I think why single panel comics appeal so much.
Well, I would almost say that in whether it's comics or comedy, stand-up comedy, that Mitch Hedberg versus someone who's like a real storyteller, the storyteller is almost like watching a sword fight, and the Mitch Hedberg is just watching someone fire off shot after shot,
Sure. Absolutely. Yeah. Good analogy. I like that.
I don't know. It just came to me. I thought it was cool, so I shared it.
The other joke that comes to mind that I like is actually, and I'm not trying to do a shameless plug here, but it just occurred to me. I just got this from Society 6. It's the snail collision.
Yeah.
Joke. It's a couple of snails have smashed into each other, and way over here you've got the
ambulance,
paramedic, paramedic snail coming to the rescue. I'm proud of that one too, just because it's anti Bogart Creek in a way. It's so quiet and so understated. And, so that doesn't happen very often. So I'm kind of,
it's such a funny concept, because obviously by the time the other snail gets there, they might be dead or something,
Well, yeah. And how did they collide in the first place?
Yeah, exactly. Where's the velocity coming from? Yeah.
It's just silly. Yeah. Like it's not, there's no malice or meanness or blood or,
it's a cute one.
It's a cute one without being saccharine,
Yeah.
And if I can, I'm always proud when I can manage that. It's like not swearing, it's elevated in a way, I guess.
No, I've been watching, you You should check out on YouTube. There's a comedy, I think it's a club, and they're called Dry Bar, and it's all clean comics. But it's some of the best comedy I've seen, and it's made me aspire. Not that I was, dropping F-bombs every second word or anything, but like I've never done like a fully clean set, and that's how you can get a lot of corporate gigs and stuff like that. Also doing much longer sets than I can do. I don't know how people go for an hour or whatever. I can do maybe 20 minutes if I've got my guitar. I got a lot of room to grow. But yeah, I don't know. I just thought that was interesting.
It is. Well, I mean, again, everybody makes their parameters, right? And if you don't have those, you just flounder. So, whatever works for you, whatever works for the individual artist. But you got to have some rules, I think.
Yeah, or guidelines at least.
I've got that border,
Yeah. When we were, one thing I wanted to mention, when you were talking about Googling to see if your stuff's been done before, and then you get fact checked once in a while. I did see when I was going through something on your website, somebody's comment underneath, you had a joke with a blind guy bringing home Medusa as like, "Mom, I want you to meet my new girlfriend."
Oh, that's really
and then he's like, Mom, and she's obviously been turned to stone. And then someone underneath is saying, "Oh, Medusa can't actually affect women with the power."
Oh, is that so?
I didn't know that either, but yeah.
I didn't even see that comment. After a certain, that's a really old one, so I have no excuse because there's probably only about 3 comments anyway. Probably only about 4 likes or something because it was so, early stages. But usually once I get more than like 10 comments, I kind of don't read them because you either get into, it's self-indulgent, and also I tend to just start to get really worked up if people don't, people are misinterpreting it or saying mean things or whatever, you just don't want to read the comments after a certain point. But that one I would have actually responded to or looked up because I was a big fan of mythology in school.
I don't know if the guy's right or not. I'm not sure if that's accurate, but I can't see why they would have written it otherwise.
Well, I did the Achilles heel joke and rightly got called out by somebody on that, although I think the joke's still funny, but I forgot the whole story. And like the reason Achilles heel was vulnerable was because his mom dipped him in the river Styx, I think it was, and that was the only part that didn't get covered with the magical waters. And I did Achilles' testicle, so he had just been kicked in the nuts by the other soldier. And so someone said, "Oh, so his mom grabbed him by his nuts and dipped him in the water?" And I was like, "Oh,
maybe. Why not?"
It's a testicle. It's a nut kicking joke. That's all it is. It's just it was a stupid joke, and I didn't even do my homework. So,
well, much like the Medusa thing, I still laughed. It still works as a joke. Most people aren't like, mythological historians that are going to cut it up. They're just going to laugh and move on,
But there's always that nerd, God bless him, most of the time anyway, who sets you straight. And I'd rather know than not know. Absolutely.
Yeah. No, but what you're saying about comment sections is totally true. It can get pretty toxic. I've learned that from doing this show. I should say, though, most people that comment on YouTube are super nice. I've been lucky, I guess, and I'm not near big enough to have a bunch of haters. But when I had Spenny on, I got a lot of their, viewers or whatever. They have a huge cult following. And again, most of them are awesome. They've been so supportive. Oh, great interview, that kind of stuff. But I got comments that just piss you off and it riles you up. People saying, "Oh, vaping is unprofessional." I'm like, you know what? I built this basement and this show to do it how the fuck I want to do it, I want to be able to swear if I want to. I want to be able to have a beer if I want to. Like, it's my show. I'm going to do it how I want. But then I'm like, am I really going to take the time to write that all out to this person, And it really, it can grind your gears. Likewise, I got a lot of shit for having a plexiglass up and trying to be like,
really? Oh.
Yeah. People are like, "Oh, that's not even protecting you," and that kind of stuff. Or what's the point of having plexiglass when you're blowing your vape smoke all over the place? Shit like that. And I'm like, I don't know. I was trying my best. Like, I'm human. I'm not a scientist.
Well, at least, you're still going to be breathing one way or another. It's just with the vape smoke, you can see where the air's circulating.
Yeah, you can dodge it a bit.
Yeah. Did you hear about that case in, I think it was in South Korea or maybe it was, I think it was in South Korea where they actually determined that because of where somebody was sitting in a restaurant in relation to the air conditioner over their head, that everybody who was downwind of them got sick, but everybody else in the restaurant was fine. And it only took about 5 minutes for that to happen. So, if you can see the smoke, you can see where the air is going, then maybe, your guests can know where they're seated,
Well, Well, as I mentioned to some of those guys afterwards, with Spenny, the reason that I vaped and I didn't really care. First of all, I would always ask a guest in studio if it bothered them. That's something I've always done, which I guess won't be an issue because I'm not vaping very much these days. But with Spenny, you know, I had picked him up and he didn't even wear a mask in my car. So I'm like, I don't think he's stressing real hard at the time. So, you know.
Yeah, it's weird how people react to the mask thing and I don't know. It's all very strange, and you know, it's hard for everybody. So I don't want to, you know, chew anybody out. But you know, the way I am as a germaphobe and hypochondriac, I feel like, you know, standing behind plexiglass, wearing a mask, Zooming instead of meeting in person, like it's not really a big sacrifice.
Yeah, like it may not be perfect, but why are you giving me shit for trying? You know, that was my sort of viewpoint.
Yeah, you're
like,
trying. You're doing something.
I'm not claiming to be a representative from the CDC or something. You know, I'm just trying to take whatever knowledge I think I have and at least give it a shot.
No, yeah, because their knowledge is changing every day too, right? Like
exactly.
I just heard on the news yesterday that, or read in the news yesterday that, you know, are spraying down with, you know, bleaching all the surfaces and Lysol wiping everything that we buy at the grocery store. Maybe not necessary. Actually.
Yeah.
But it's once it lands on a countertop, it's dead. It's really just the breathing that's the issue. Like I'm going to keep Lysol wiping stuff, but
well, that's what I was going to say is I had the same, you know, I read that shit too, and I thought, okay, I am pretty sick of washing my groceries, but I ended up continuing to do it. Going back to what we were talking about earlier, just because people are gross. Like, yeah, I might not get COVID, but I might get the flu or have one of their pubes in there or something.
Great. Thank you for that image. Now,
now you really got to scrub. Oh, man. I was going to say Bogart Creek Volume 2 came out in October, right?
End of October or early November. I can't remember which, yeah.
So when can we expect Volume 3?
Maybe I can't say for sure because it's really up to my publisher if we're going to have one. I know
you should keep doing them, dude. Your stuff is like, I'm not just saying this to flatter you, but your stuff is really, really, really good. And it's up there with the people that you say inspired you, in my opinion. Like I've laughed as hard or harder at your stuff than I have at, you know, one of Gary Larson's or one of those Bizarros or whatever. It's equal to me. So
thank you so much.
Don't stop, man. I think you're going places for sure. And the more people that get exposed to your stuff, the more you're just going to keep propelling yourself. So,
well, thank you so much. And this is helping with that. So thanks for having me on the show. And yeah, I want book 3 to come out. I imagine realistically, if it's going to happen, I mean, the pandemic has really kicked the ass of the publishing industry. So, you know, it's hard to predict, but, I would imagine maybe a year and a half or so. Like, I don't think it would be Christmas next year. That's a bit soon. Yeah. But I'm optimistically hoping that maybe in a year and a half, I'll certainly have the material for another book because I'm cranking.
Well, that's what I was going to say is even the books you've put out, you obviously sort of handpicked because you have many others that aren't in the books. So you could just take a bunch of the ones that you didn't include.
The cutting room floor?
Well, I wouldn't. They're on your Instagram still, a lot of them, so they're not exactly cutting room floor. But that's actually a good question, I suppose, is how did you go about the process of deciding which ones would make it into your you know, compilation books?
I leaned really heavily on my wife. She's the curator of the books, and she also figures out what ones face each other on pages. My publisher as well. They sort of shared that responsibility. I'm too close to it and also just don't seem to have a knack for knowing, like, again, like the sequence that things work well in. Like she was, you know, I printed them all off, stuck them to the wall or put them out on the floor. And then we just sort of went through and put X's and stuff on the ones that we weren't really, you know, thrilled with. So thin it down to maybe about 200, 250, because we got to ultimately get it down to 136 pages. So about 134 jokes. But then figuring out which ones complement each other on facing pages, she just naturally has an instinct for not only the compositional complements. So like you notice like there'll be like a diagonal this way on one page and a diagonal that way on another. Yeah. She would think about that stuff, but also thematically, you know, like there'll be 2 pages that have horse jokes on them or hamster jokes or whatever. She'll pair them off that way. And I just didn't see it amidst this whole big pile of gags, you know? So yeah, God bless her. My wife, Jillian, did the lion's share of that. And then of course it also fell to my publisher to let me know if he thought any had been left out that should be included or swap things around. There are also some, after a certain point, Jillian was a bit, over it, and it's just like, I've said my piece. It's up to you guys to finish it. And so there was some that we swapped out later on that, Alexander Finbo from Renegade Arts Entertainment was my publisher, and a great guy. He made the final calls on areas where there was some weak spots, that kind of thing too. So
yeah, that's interesting. Yeah. I hadn't even thought about the aesthetic of like which ones would face each other.
Me too.
Yeah, that's
I figured just pick the ones you like and throw them all together, and there you are. But no, it's good to think these things through.
It's smart that you included. At least I noticed when I was looking through the books, several like pop culture, easy to associate with a lot of people's interests or whatever you want to say, like the aliens and superhero stuff. There was I believe a couple of the superhero ones made it in, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, there's the Hawkman's first day as a superfan, and there's Thanos at he's very nonplussed at visiting someone's infinity pool.
Yeah.
And Batman and Robin eating some bad oysters. So yeah, actually, this book 2 had twice as many pop cultural jokes, it turns out, as book 1. I didn't even realize that until my dad pointed it out. He's not a huge fan of those, I don't think.
Well, if you don't get the reference, then it's obviously less enjoyable.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
But for the people who do get the reference, sometimes it's even more enjoyable. Like I don't think it was in either of your books, but your one where you see just Spider-Man walking down the road, and this was his one and only trip to the prairies.
You're right.
That's something that's always been joked about, if there's no buildings, he's kind of a lot less effective. He can't web sling anywhere. Yeah,
that one I think I drew after the selections have been made for book 3, but I don't think I'd have included it anyway, because actually in the comments section, I don't remember where it was exactly, probably Imager, someone said, "Oh, you must be a fan of so-and-so," and I was like, "Oh crap, who's so-and-so? Has it happened again?" And I looked him up, and it was a stand-up comic from 10 years ago who had an act where he talks about Spider-Man being stuck in like the middle of Oklahoma or something like that. And he can't shoot his webs on anything. So it's the same joke, but he wouldn't stand up for him. Again, I Googled it. I looked it up for cartoons that had done it.
There's only so much you can do. Yeah.
Yeah, but I can't possibly know it was put in a stand-up act from 10 years ago. I mean, it's one of the challenges of doing pop cultural jokes, though. It's kind of like puns, right? There's a certain set number of things that we all know. There are metaphors, and like words in the English language, everybody has those to play with. It's more likely that somebody's going to have come up with a Fred Flintstone joke than just a caveman joke.
Yeah. With Spider-Man too, people used to always joke about the old 60s cartoon where he was effectively swinging from the clouds.
Yeah, those are awesome. And I think, wasn't it a Canadian who did the music, did the awesome soundtrack?
That I didn't know.
I think, he passed away not too long ago. And a lot of people were surprised, myself included, to learn that was Canadian. I feel like I've got to Google that now, but pretty sure. Yeah.
I had a joke a while ago that I did a couple times about how Spider-Man never really had like a New Yorker accent. And and some people have said Tom Holland has a bit of an accent, but I mean, like I wanted like, what's his name? Good Lord.
I'm swinging here.
Yeah, exactly. That was one of them. Hey, I'm web slinging here. Or like, hey, that Mary Jane, I'll give her a different kind of web fluid, which is a little crass, but
oh, dear.
that kind of a vibe.
Yeah.
I got to wrap this up, but there's a couple of things. First, I wanted to just point out a couple of yours that I really love. I love the whale humping the submarine, and they're just like battle stations. That's so good.
There's a sexual joke. I found I got one in there.
Yeah, exactly. That was a sexual one. And the Pac-Man one where there's a guy waiting at a stoplight and he's looking at the little walking man symbol with the Pac-Man, and then you've got the Pac-Man just coming in from the panel. I just thought that one was genius too.
Pac-Man, I find Pac-Man really funny for some reason.
It's a weird character. Yeah.
3 Pac-Man jokes now so far.
Oh, really?
Yeah. I did Indiana Jones being chased by Pac-Man as he comes out of the cave at the beginning of Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Yeah.
And I did sort of an homage to Walking Dead, where you've got one ghost is in front of the other ghost as Pac-Man's chasing him, and he shoots him in his what would be a ghost foot. And the one ghost is falling on the ground, about to be eaten by Pac-Man. He's kind of like, "You bastard!"
I saw that one. Okay, well, hopefully everyone will go check out your stuff. They definitely should. But before we go, I'll ask you, I have a question we ask everybody at the end of the episode. It's changed for this season. We've modified it a bit, but it now is, if you could go to any point in history for a day and have dinner with somebody, who would it be and when would that be?
Oh, man, I really wish you told me this before.
I like this.
I'm going to come up with something, and afterwards I'm going to wake up in the middle of the night. I'm going to like, why didn't I say Jimi Hendrix?
Yeah.
If I could go back in time and have dinner with anybody,
Yeah, for a day. So you get to come back to your own time period after, you know.
Yeah. Well, see, now the obvious sort of tearjerker answer would be like my grandfather, who I never really got to know, right?
Oh, sorry. I should have someone that you've never met. I always leave out that part.
Oh, jeez.
Maybe I should prep people on this one.
Yeah, give
so open-ended, yeah.
Well, because I don't want to sound like a, pompous, if I say so, Albert Einstein, like.
That's a cool one.
Well, it would be, yeah.
Yeah.
But, that's rather obvious, or,
Some people might say Jesus, like what really went down,
Yeah. That's maybe not the Last Supper, but.
Yeah.
A meal.
Well, while you're thinking,
I'll go ahead and say Mitch Hedberg. Sit down and have
perfect.
Yeah, because I would love to it would be a one-sided conversation. I don't know how chatty he really was, but
yeah, I wonder if he spoke in one-liners. Yeah,
yeah, it might be very stilted conversation.
Yeah, but that's a great answer, though.
I'll think of something else as soon as we hang up, and I'll be kicking myself for the rest of the week. But
I got to say too, has anyone ever told you that you look like Owen Wilson with a fixed nose?
Yeah, actually.
Okay, it's just dawning on me seeing you through this the Zoom interview.
Fixed nose. Thank you for adding that.
Well, I mean, his is kind of glaringly crooked. Yeah.
Yeah, he has an unusual nose. It's true. No, I see it when people point it out, but I completely forget it the rest of the time. Like I love them. Is he the one in Midnight in Paris?
I believe so. I haven't seen that, but I think I vaguely know of it.
Yeah. So I love that movie. I watch it a lot. And
can you give us a wow?
Wow. Yeah. I've only seen Zoolander in pieces, Like it's tragic.
Oh yeah.
I know it's supposed to be brilliant. My wife loves it. I've just never seen
the first one, at least. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
The sequel was, and everyone knows him from Wedding Crashers as well. Was another one that was really big.
Right.
Yeah.
I liked him in that too. Yeah. Anyway,
he seems like a nice guy.
Yeah, he does seem like a nice guy. And he's pretty neurotic too, so we share that in common.
Well, he had, I think, a suicide attempt like 10, 15 years ago. Yeah.
Oh, now I feel bad for saying that. But yeah, well, I'm glad he didn't.
Yeah, same here. Yeah, hopefully he keeps making movies.
Yeah, and hopefully things are turned around. That sucks.
He's going to be in that Loki show too.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I saw the trailer for Loki's getting a show on Disney Plus, and he's like some agent who works at this place. You should check it out. Yeah, it looks pretty cool.
That'll pay the bills.
Yeah, definitely.
Well done, Mr. Wilson.
Yeah, I'm sure he was living pretty already.
No doubt. Yeah.
Thanks again, man, so much for just taking the time to talk with me, and I'll continue to enjoy your work. And we're going to say goodbye, but stay on the call so I can tell you a couple of mine after this.
Oh, yeah, I look forward to that. And thank you so much for having me on and for your support. And congrats on your show. It's growing success. I think you're really going places. I'm honored to be a part of it. So
thanks.
Cheers.
Thank you so much. BogartCreek.com. Check it out. And Instagram. Thanks a lot. Bye, man.
Take care.